It's so impactful for people to do things that are just for attention. It don't make sense.
Yeah.
It just don't make sense.
Yeah.
And I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about your P turning into your B. I don't want to talk about it.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is episode 31. Ebony wrote today's intro again, so that's why we're now sending out wishes for a happy Juneteenth to everyone who celebrates it. Don't know what Juneteenth is? Press pause on the podcast and go look it up. We'll wait. Today is the first day of Feminist Frequency Summer School, so let's all commit to learning something. Today's the first day of Feminist Frequency Summer School?
I just convened class.
Cool.
Sit down. Quit making noise.
In the meantime, I'm joined in the studio by my regular schmegular co-host, Ebony Astor.
Okay, I love that you used the actual intro I wrote because last week you didn't, but I am a little bit disappointed that you gave regular schmegular such a basic reading.
I'm sorry, Ebony.
That's all right. I'm going to work with you during the course of this podcast.
We also have a very special guest on this episode. You might remember him from the bonus conversations we shared from this year's JoCo cruise. Everybody welcome back Open Mike Eagle.
Hi, everybody.
Yay!
Yeah.
This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love, or alternatively, we're the feminist killjoys coming for your media, depending on your perspective. In today's show, we're going to be talking about a pretty eclectic mix of topics. We'll talk about the gender breakdown of the games featured at this year's E3 industry event. I'm going to talk a little bit about my horror in watching The Handmaid's Tale finally. And if we're very lucky, we're going to get Mike to talk about his love for wrestling and what led him to start a wrestling podcast.
Oh, sure.
Exclusively for our fantastic drip backers, Carolyn's going to be bringing you something special in this week's bonus episode. What is drip, you ask? Well, it's a subscription-based membership platform, and your generous support is what helps us keep making this podcast. If you want access to special perks and exclusive backer rewards, join our podcast community at d.rip/femfreak. Now on with the batshit show.
Don't even set Mike up that way. Let's act like we have it together.
It's a little, we talk about what shows are on the rails and off the rails. And this one, we have no format. So it's just going to be off the rails from the get-go.
But that intro was so delicately scripted. I feel like that's going to hold it all together.
Are you listening?
On its
Yes.
own.
That's the infrastructure from which everything hangs.
Yeah, we got an intro and outro. What are you, the inside, the middle? It's just the
Oreo
middle.
It's just the meat in the sandwich.
Which is the best part.
I guess.
I don't know though.
Unless it's like a Vietnamese, like a banh mi, that bread. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a gyro in the house that as soon as this is over, I'm going to get George Jefferson on.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
You're gonna
so talk about bread.
You're going to do a wild walk to it?
Oh, my God. Yes.
Man.
Yes.
You got any pop culture news for us?
I do have some pop culture news. I'm going to lean back from the mic from a second.
It's about to get real.
Oh, my God. Okay. So by now, most of you probably know Her Royal Majesty Beyonce Knowles Carter and her husband, some dude, I believe his name is Jim, I don't know.
James sounds right.
Right. Anyway.
James E, I think it is.
They were like, you know what? I'm not doing anything today. Let's go ahead and bless these airwaves with a collaborative album. So it's, if you go to Spotify, where it's now available, it is available under the name The Carters. I think the name of it is Everything Is Love. Now, okay, despite that intro, I'm not a bass stan. That's just, B, the queen, whatever, cool. But she's always someone who's aesthetics I vibe with,
right.
But in terms of musically, I can dip in and out and I'm cool. This one, though, I don't know if it's because it's summer. My spirit was open. I just got back from a crazy road trip with Anita.
Wait, you listened to it already?
Yeah.
Damn!
Girl, I
tried to listen to it so Ebony and I just drove to and from Vegas, and I was it was announced that morning, and so I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to subscribe to Tidal for a month just to listen to this thing.
A weird game.
You and 2/3 of Tidal's customer base.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it wouldn't work. And so we didn't get to listen to it on the way home.
Right. But like I said, it's now available on Spotify
shit.
because, I'm about to reveal my secrets. Was I going to pirate it after someone else, signed on to Tidal and downloaded that shit? Maybe, maybe not. But luckily, I Googled it this morning, and they were like, yo, it's now available on Spotify.
Wait a minute.
Just look on under the Carters.
Quick question.
Yes.
Philosophically, can you pirate something that's streaming?
Ooh.
Is that
right? So
pirating?
This is an interesting question because I only do this for Beyonce. No, and I'm not lying because I feel like, and this is completely morally indefensible. You either have principles or you don't, right? So if you believe in supporting artists, then you support artists. But I do feel like, okay, you know what? This billionaire does not need my $12.99 or whatever, cut she gets. But so when B releases stuff and it hits Tidal and it's only available, exclusively on Tidal for a little bit, I'm like, I know that my brothers and sisters on the interwebs are going to hook me up. So I'm not going to have to go through the, trials that you did trying to re-up my Tidal subscription just to listen to this. For the most part, I try not to pirate. So I have not asked myself, if something's streaming, what does it mean to pirate it, right?
Well, and also if it's streaming, you're paying for a subscription service and the artists aren't getting any money. How much money you get from fucking Spotify? Don't answer
pennies
that. But
per play. Oh, no, it's public knowledge.
Yeah, sure. I didn't
fractions
want to spot.
fractions of a penny per play. But it's like this, right? If you have Tidal, Anita and Ebony, you're in the car listening on Anita's stream.
You're stealing.
Is that a pirate? Is that piracy?
I do feel like, intent does matter, right? Because
Whatever. We all used LimeWire and fucking Napster back in the day.
Yeah, no, but see,
LimeWire.
but
Whatever
see,
it was called.
Kazaa, Morpheus, Audio Galaxy, all of them.
Don't pick up the phone. I'm trying to
What was it called? Not LimeWire.
No, there was
called
LimeWire.
something. It was. Okay.
LimeWire was the one that would infest your computer with all sorts of strange computer diseases.
I'm sure my dad loved that when I was a
It's
kid.
gross.
This is why your mom could not figure out that it was Hadaway singing "What Is Love"
Oh, God,
because
that's a
LimeWire
story
was
for
leading her
another
along,
day.
right?
That's a story for another day.
But that was different at that time.
It's very different.
Because that was an actual, okay, you have to spend something per unit to purchase this thing versus it's available and you subscribe to the platform to hear it. Because I feel like when anyone puts out an album these days, their ultimate intention is that people hear it. Because that generates all the money later. Like you said, the streams don't generate the money. Like the cultural impact generates the money because they have to sell the tickets to the concert. So I'm not sure they care too much.
Yeah. Okay, well, A, that makes me feel better.
Oh, I'm here to absolve you of all of your
but
digital
I love
sins.
we have an actual artist here with, that kind of informed take on it because, I was probably just spout some bullshit. But yeah, I mean, in my defense, I do spend money on merch and, concert tickets and stuff. And I do know that that's where the real money is for artists.
Yeah,
it's like I wouldn't buy bootleg merch because I know that's fucked
If you're
up.
at home printing your own T-shirts, it'd be a whole different conversation.
Right, exactly. No, I'm not that person. So, okay, well, I feel good as hell about my piracy now. So.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Fine.
Okay.
Okay, I know you have another piece of pop culture news, but I would like to, since we're on the off the rails already episode, I'd like to discuss something that happened to me on my cab ride over here. I was over at the YouTube space, and
humble brag.
Yeah. So, God, I'm so privileged to be. Well, actually, I'll take. Okay, let's not.
There are 13-year-olds desperate to break into that YouTube biz who are like, wow.
They were like, I was doing this interview. They're like, how long have you been on YouTube? I was like, oh God, like a decade.
Yeah.
Fuck. Anyways, my cab driver put on the new Kanye West Kid Cudi album called Kids See Ghosts. And I've been actively avoiding all of the Kanye shit, right? Like Nas's new album, I was like, I don't want to deal with this motherfucker. It's good. I was like, why did you do this to me? Because now I'm going to go fucking listen to it more. But it was like, have you listened to it?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
I haven't been caught in that Uber yet.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's like we've talked on this podcast a bunch about like, what do you do when you know that the creators are pieces of shit and like are perpetrators or say dumb shit or whatever it might be? And like, I've never really liked Kanye. I've always thought he was annoying and like whatever. But then all this shit that happened recently. And so I was like, oh man, he's releasing all this stuff with these artists and I'm like avoiding it, even though people are telling me it's really good. And so I was kind of pissed that this guy I just didn't have any consent in this situation.
Yeah, it's violating.
And it's good.
Right. I hope your Lyft driver was just like watching you go through the 7 stages of grief in the backseat.
I told him
car while you listened to this.
I was like, he was like, we were just talking about hip hop or whatever, and he was like, yeah, have you heard this? And blah, blah, blah. And he put it on, and I was like, oh, but he's so shitty. And he was like, he didn't really acknowledge that I was like, what do you do when there's shitty dudes making music? And he was just like, no, I'm not here for this.
Yeah, like I'm not having this conversation.
He just
with you,
no-sold
customer.
the shittiness. He just wasn't.
No, he wasn't into it.
Yeah.
He wasn't into it.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think there is no right answer that's going to satisfy everyone. Like the three of us in this room, as smart as we all are.
I'm pretty dumb. But go ahead.
Like we're not going to come up with an answer that no one has thought of yet for how to reconcile the amazing art that shitty people produce sometimes. Like, yeah, the reality is that there are people who we wouldn't pee on if they were on fire, but they put out some fire music, you know? Like, or they're amazing, painters, whatever. So everyone has their line. I guess the one thing I would tell people is respect other folks' lines. So if I say to you, like, oh, have you listened to this new Kanye album? And you're like, no, and here's why, it is then incumbent upon me to respect your choice.
Yeah. Well, I'm not actually pissed at this driver. It's
No,
fine,
but I'm saying like in general, right?
Yeah,
like
it's a complicated thing.
everybody has a line. So
Well, and
start
also,
there, respecting other people's choices.
For those of us who like try to stay up on the trends and like try to stay up on what's happening in pop culture, like to be like, no, I'm not gonna engage with this thing is it feels like a hard decision to make. Like I was when I went to see Ocean's 8, they were playing trailers for the new Fantastic Beasts movie, and I was like, I'm not going to see this because fuck Johnny Depp. Like, and so I want to see
Johnny
it.
Depp and J.K. Rowling, whose like responses to this whole thing, like that's almost I shouldn't say it's worse because it's not worse, but just extra cherry disappointing on the crap Sunday. I don't know.
Yeah,
J.K., get it together.
Yeah.
You hear that, JK?
Yeah, you listen to JK?
Get it together.
She's one of our, original founding members to this podcast.
All right, what else you got?
Just more, shitty person news. So Chris Hardwick.
That's pretty much all of our pop culture news is like,
I know,
who
every
is
week,
shitty
right?
this week?
Right? So Chris Hardwick, former host of the Nerdist show, just like heavily kind of affiliated with that brand and like white nerddom in general, like a specific kind of brand of white male nerddom. Over the weekend, stories were revealed that he had been abusive. He's alleged to have been abusive to a past partner. So I know AMC has cut ties with him. I think, some of his other gigs have severed ties with him. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is not because his case is in any way different from the other shitty dudes that we call out for like abusive, violent, predatory behavior, but the way in which no one appears to be tired of gaslighting the women who come forward with these stories with the response, okay, we need to hear both sides. We need to give this dude due process. You're just doing it for the fame or the money. Why didn't you report this, when it first happened? We've tackled this subject over and over again. Like you say, this is always pop culture news, right? Nerd culture will break its own arm, patting itself on the back for, apparently being free thinkers, and yet they can be the most regressive and the most invested in upholding traditional systems of power when it comes to race, when it comes to gender, sexuality. So, disappointed, yes. Surprised, no.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about E3 a little bit. So, Mike, what's your relationship to E3?
I went for the first time this year.
Did you? What did you do?
What was the first thing I did? I went and got a drink.
That sounds right.
That was the first thing I did. No. I stopped by a giant Sekiro statue and fantasized about taking a picture, but I didn't.
Wow.
I don't know why. I think it was just because it was the first thing I saw, and I just wanted to hurry up and see everything else. And then I walked by the thing where people were standing in line to take photos in Overwatch green screen, to where they would put, I really wanted to do it, but the line was too long. And then I got a drink, and then I stood and watched the wrestlers, The New Day, and these other wrestlers called the Elite. They had a best of 7 Street Fighter match there. I caught a pancake that was thrown into the crowd by one of the wrestlers. It's a long story. a long story.
We got time.
Yeah.
Right?
We got so much time.
The New Day, they're 3 wrestlers in the WWE, and man, their gimmick started out as almost like this kind of churchy religious thing. We're like, we're the New Day and we're positive, and then everybody hated that. So then they turned into bad guys, and then they got real cool, and they always, like, every couple of months they just start doing something different, right? They've come out in like Dragon Ball cosplay. They have a cereal that they made called Bootios. And
Called what?
Bootios.
Called what?
Bootios!
So they took like a hard left from, the church Holy Roller.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's what you're supposed to do. If you present
Yeah.
a gimmick and people aren't into it, you're supposed to lean all the way in the other direction. But their latest thing is that they throw pancakes out. And
Did you eat it?
No. So many people told me not to eat it that I was like, I can't not listen to this.
But it was a legit on my Eggo waffle. Pancake, like it wasn't like
That's
a
a
plastic
waffle,
thing or
Ebony,
whatever.
not a
Right, but I'm
pancake.
saying like a real, breakfast good.
This wasn't a plastic.
Phil, Wonder producer, shut off her mic.
But,
Cut the feed.
I know a couple people who know them personally and were with them when they procured this particular batch of pancakes. They had gone to IHOP like at 6 in the morning.
It ain't IHOP anymore.
Well, I'm not going to call it whatever it is.
Right?
That whole thing.
We were driving to Vegas, we saw so many IHOPs, and I was like, they're getting slow to changing those damn signs.
Because they shouldn't do it. It's stupid.
No shit.
Yeah, it's this. Oh, I really hate this day and age specifically because it's so impactful for people to do things that are just for attention. It don't make sense.
Yeah.
It just don't make sense, and I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about your P turning into your B. I don't want to talk about it. I don't care.
That's what this podcast is all about.
Sex education.
Yeah.
It should be. Right? You know how like their, New Day's gimmick, they had to pivot. Maybe it's time for Feminist Frequency Radio to pivot into
what?
Like a sex positive or sex ed kind of podcast.
Why is that?
I got nothing. No.
Yeah, me either. I'm just saying. Let's add it to the
list.
list of things we might
It's
do
not
in
outside
the
the
future.
realm of things we care about, though. I was expecting something like
things we're
let's talk
knowledgeable
about
about,
like
that's something different,
power
but-
drills. Although power drills are cool, but still.
To sustain a podcast, right? Of course, I say that, and I bet there's probably dozens
Have
of
you
power
seen the
drill
videos on
podcasts.
YouTube like that are like about like lawn chairs, like hours and hours of just it's real.
There's people who stream about their like patio furniture on Twitch.
Yeah,
It's fascinating.
And
but okay,
have an audience.
so your first E3,
Yeah.
what did you think?
I was excited to go.
And then you got there and you're like, oh.
No. I mean, I really. It's the kind of thing too where I'm excited because I'm really into gaming now. So just excited to see all the excitement around games, and I was able to like connect with a bunch of people who I don't see very often. Some people who were just in town for that, and like kind of, I don't know, it was a networking thing for me too in a way. So I was only there for like 4 hours. I spent way too much money to be there for 4 hours, but I also figured out the way that I probably won't have to pay anymore because I had to kind of figure that out too. Like, how does my meanness help me get here for free next year? So I figured that out too. It was great. I had a really good time.
Good.
Yeah.
So every year, Feminist Frequency
Does an analysis. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what we do is we look at all of the major press conferences and we count the amount of games that are talked about and announced, and we look at the gender breakdown of them. And it's kind of, I'm getting like excited about the fact that we've been doing this because we now have 4 years worth of data, which is a substantial amount of like data to assess the state of the industry. And the reason I started doing this was because was I there that year? 1 year, 4 years ago, it was like everyone was announcing that it was like the year of the woman. There's all these games with women. Oh my God. All these stories about the year of the woman at E3. And I was like, y'all are high. Like, what? And so I was like, let's count. Like, literally, let's just count it so we can see. And it wasn't substantial at all. So what we found, so we've been doing this every year since then. Outside of 1 year where there were 2 games with female characters, like abysmally low. Every other year for the last 4 years, the female characters have hovered around 8 to 9%. every year. So while we feel like things are changing, statistically, what the biggest game show of the year is showing us is that it's still kind of the same. What's interesting this year is, though, we had to add a new section, which we call gender ambiguous. And those were games that had characters who were gender ambiguous. We couldn't tell the gender, or they were specifically designed to be a little more gender neutral or a little questionable in that way. So, Journey is an example of that from the past. So this year there were games like Tunic, for example, which has a little fox that's adorable, and it's not explicitly gendered in its design. And so that was 5% of games this year, which is kind of cool. Like, I think that's a cool trend. But we're still talking about 24% of games announced at E3 had male protagonists. That's 8% to 24% is still a huge difference. And one of the things is one of the points that we try to make with this data is like, 50% is usually, we call it multi, right? So it's you can build your own character, or it's a cast of characters that you choose from. But we need stories about women where the player is forced to play, or not forced, encouraged and welcome to play the story of a woman and live that experience, because that's what games are so cool about.
Question.
Yeah.
Is there any weighting in that data toward the height of the platform of the game?
No.
That's interesting.
That would be interesting.
I wonder, like, if because a Bethesda game might be more impactful than an indie studio. So that just crossed my mind.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's actually really interesting in that, because we are talking about almost all the games that are announced. We don't count the little. I have no words today. The little montages, because they go so quickly, but everything else we count. And I often focus a lot on AAA because they have the biggest cultural impact.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Usually. But there are also significantly less big AAA games a year. Oh.
Is that? That's interesting too. But I guess, is that state of the industry thing?
Made that up. But I feel like indie game, there's more indie games than there are, because indie games come out more frequently because AAA games are so massively huge and take years to make. Yeah. So this is interesting to me because we now have statistical data showing us that it's not really, at least in this particular arena, that it's still the same. It's not actually getting better, but it feels like it is. Right?
There are those studies that talk about if there are, say, 10 people in a room, and if there are 2 women in that room, the perception among the men in that room is that there's roughly gender equity in the room. Whereas, for women, they will start to perceive gender equity at a higher level. Maybe not even, 5 of them, but say 4, So when we have stories coming out of E3, for instance, and there have been really great conversations on Twitter about this, one of the things that folks have been quick to trumpet is, Gamergate has caused a sea change, we're finally doing better. What exactly do they see? By what metric are they saying we're doing things better? If we can point to data, that says over the past 4 years, for instance, in this one area, no, it's pretty much the same. So, how are they assessing, this difference?
I would imagine that reaction comes from, the larger flagship franchises that make it a point to their Battlefield, for instance, this year, right? There was this big reaction that the protagonist is now female, right? So, in the eyes of gamers who are probably very sensitive, the Gamergate people who are very sensitive about, that's a huge blow to them.
Right.
So their perception is probably, it's all being taken away from us, and then so in their perception it's a big huge difference, because they're not looking at the total amount of games. So they're not thinking of the fact that, okay, this one protagonist gender flipped, but in addition to that, there's 4 new IP that are all males. They're not thinking of that. They're just thinking of the loss of one thing.
Right. And if the female characters that we're getting conform to the same, kind of models that, enforce certain beauty standards or weight standards or whatever, is that really progress? But yeah, I just, I wonder because I'm not a gamer.
We're turning her into one though.
Yeah, slowly but surely, right? I'm like those old people that like they have nothing else to do, and so like you give them a Switch and whatever, and then you come back in 6 months and grandma's beasting you on everything. But no, I wonder about this conversation, because people, I think for them, the mere fact of the conversation means that the culture has changed. And it's like, no, okay, yeah, it's great that we have now opened our mouths and we're now saying these things, but that's not the end of it. Just pointing out the problem, diagnosing the sickness does not mean you have treated the sickness or, found a cure or a vaccine.
It's even worse than that to me. And I look at, because it's analogous to what happens in discussions of race, like, because literally people thought that, like, once Obama was president, that racism was over. Yeah. And the nuts and bolts of that is this unwillingness for people to have like the conversations about institutional racism and racism in historical context, and just all of these individual, terrible, awful, difficult conversations that have to happen between like where we are and this idealized state. They want to skip all of that. Yep. Because one thing happened. Right.
Totally. And what I was thinking as you were talking, Ebony, is that these numbers don't account for race. Mm-hmm. And so when we're looking at the state of the industry, I'll be like, oh my God, there's, several games with female protagonists and there's several games with like black men as protagonists. And so that's not factored into this data, but is something to be like celebratory and aware of to some degree. I think it is different. Like, I think that there is a shift that happened because the conversation has opened up and we are seeing some results of that, but it's very slow and it's not as big as people think it is, right? And this is good for me to check too, because I get asked all the time, is it getting better? Is it changing? And I kind of like, I'm like, kinda.
There's two answers.
Yeah, and it's never that easy, right? But some of it is also that like there is less. Okay, I'm going to asterisk this statement, but I'm going to say that there's less explicit, grotesque sexism in major AAA games that are coming out now. It still happens, and I can definitely point to a whole handful of examples, but it's just not like every goddamn game like it used to be.
It seems like there's more awareness around it now. So, like, if I would imagine it, if you're working in creative in one of these game studios, there's now it's more likely that somebody's going to speak up and be like, hey, that's not what we should be doing. Right. Like, and of course those people get outvoted sometimes too. Like, studios are still made up of people who still exist in society that are in different places. But it certainly seems like there's more awareness. Now it seems like what the data that you're pointing to is reflecting is that the actual product process is a lot slower. But the conversations, it seems like, are happening a little bit more.
The other thing that we sort of loosely tracked was the presenters on stage. Yeah. There were like 3 women on stage in all of the press conferences. I think there was whatever, I don't know what it is. There's very, very, very few. So we're still seeing such a small amount of women representing the industry as well. So like,
is that reflective of the like employment numbers as well? Is that kind of...
I don't know the latest data in that. Like, it's still obviously like women are still very underrepresented in tech in general. But it's a sad state of affairs when you have no women representing your studio or your publisher, the studio's publishers run and all that.
Did you guys see the Ed Werder stuff today?
No.
Do you know who that is?
No.
He's a long-standing household name of like NFL journalists.
Oh, okay.
There was a female writer for Sports Illustrated who was posting about some hiring they're doing and saying that she's especially looking for like to help women get that position. And he started going after it on Twitter, like saying, "Oh, does that mean that no men should apply?" Like this fuck. Yeah, like it's that same thing. It's like, damn, like. Do you not see what she's trying to work against? Like, especially like, sports journalism is probably akin to video games in terms of how male dominated it is. And then he's crying because she wants to help women.
Because some hypothetical future dude might not get the job that some hypothetical future woman might get. You know, these folks who are the gatekeepers will, you know, talk out of one side of their mouths and say, yes, we're all for, you know, equality of access. But what they actually mean is when every position has been filled and every dude who wants something has been catered to, if there's any left, y'all can have that. And we're happy to have you have it, you know? But first, we're gonna take care of our own. And the reason why we're doing that, you know, they will rationalize it and say, well, you know, it's all about the cultural fit that you bring, or, you know, naturally boys grow up to involved in sports culture more, so they have like a more organic knowledge of this, or, you know, guys who are sports fans want to hear from other guys, but they will come up with an infinite amount of reasons for it. But what it all boils down to is, hey, yeah, we're happy to have you after every, you know, position has been filled with, you know, a white dude. Then if there's any left, you know, the rest of y'all can fight for those scraps.
This guy's specific rationale was akin to what I was saying earlier about, because his whole thing was, well, we should make it so anybody can have that job. But it's like you're skipping steps. Like what she's working against are like these cultural factors that keep people from getting stuff. And you can't just like skip to idealism. Like you have to work against those things. And he just couldn't see that.
Right.
You know?
And he has a big platform, so he's driving a whole bunch of harassment and shit.
Oh my God, you know? It's horrible. Yeah. And I, you know, me and the Charlotte Wilder is her name, the writer, like we follow each other on Twitter, so I'm like seeing it all. I'm like, this is fucking awful. Yeah. You know?
What does gender look like in wrestling?
Smooth segue, Anita.
I was actually really impressed with myself.
I was too.
That was good. Yeah. That was real good. It came from a really, really horrible place to now like actually getting better. I mean, the thing is, the WWE is, because they are the dominant force in wrestling pop culture, and they've patted themselves on the back a lot for this and make sure everybody notices that it's different now. So in the last, let's say, 3 or 4 years, they've been doing a women's revolution, quote unquote. I'm doing with my fingers right now for the people listening at home, and that's involved taking women's wrestling, which for a long time was strictly programmed for ratings. Strictly. So it didn't matter if the girls could work in the ring or not. Right. As long as they looked hot and were willing to put on whatever they wanted them to put on. Right. There were like bra and panties matches and mud wrestling and all of this stuff that was just literally to attract 18, 35-year-old males to watch the product and not watch the competition.
That reminds me of, what was it called in baseball, where you had like women and people of color could play in the fake leagues,
like the exhibition.
Yeah, but they were called something. But it feels like the same kind of idea, where it's like you don't get to be serious ball players, you get to be like goofy, and they were always like more performative, or like it was a weird thing because it was women playing games or black folks playing games or playing baseball or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean,
like it's spectacle. That's what I'm looking for.
It's definitely spectacle, and it was. Whereas the males were treated as, you know, competition or whatever, the women, it was lighthearted. But now they've developed a lot more women to like actually compete on the same level, and they've made it so that like most of the spectacle matches that the men have, they have women's versions of those too. So the athleticism is becoming more valued for women.
So there are women wrestling teams and male wrestling teams, yeah? And then is it kind of like basketball, where like most people don't give a shit about women's basketball?
No, because wrestling is a sport that's so predicated on who the company is marketing and their personality. There's extremely popular women, extremely popular. Like nice. And it's the same. Right. The problem is this: they have about 5 hours of televised wrestling they program per week, and I would imagine the women's programming only gets like 1 hour of that time. Okay. So that's where they have a lot of work to do still, because they have the same writing team writing for the men and writing for the women. They just don't give the women enough storylines. is the main problem. So they have to work on fixing the time presentation.
How did you go? Sorry.
I was just going to ask what I think you were going to ask. How did you get into wrestling? How did you get into wrestling? Like, was this something that you used to watch as a kid?
Absolutely. All my life. My earliest memories are like watching with my dad. We used to go to matches and all of that. Like, so back from when I thought it was like very real. And then, you know, my development with it has kind of been, it's kind of been a journey of like me and the internet. Cause like once like I got fully invested and had access to the internet, like the first thing I did was go to like wrestling sites. And when you do that, you find out how deep the fakeness is, and it becomes fascinating in this whole entire other way where like I know the backstage drama, I know like who the writers are, I know what the you know, the drama is, and you know, all of that stuff, which makes it a whole different sort of presentation when you're watching with those eyes.
And do you feel like that's integral to fandom in general? Like, not in wrestling fandom in general, like all of that?
Increasingly.
Yeah.
Like now, if you look at the chants that people chant in arenas now, like more of them now than ever are like things you would only know if you like know backstage drama.
Interesting.
Like, they're still children there dressed up like their favorites, but the majority of the adults now all know exactly what's up. And there's this, there's expectations that we bring as fans because we understand that the whole business is predicated on them giving us what we want. And so when they don't do that, we make a real big stink about it. Right there in the arena because we're part of the show.
Right.
You know, like you can't, they've tried to do it. They've tried to do pro wrestling in empty arenas. It doesn't work. You have to have the fan as a character and they have to be reacting to the right thing.
Right. Wow, that's such a weird visual to think of a wrestling match with nobody around.
It is the most depressing shit. It's just two people beating each other up for fake. Like, you know what I mean? It's really, it's horrible. But they've tried it because we are the X factor, you know? We pay the money, and we are the emotion in the product. Because when it's done right, we are emotionally invested. Like it engages our suspension of disbelief, like in a crazy. Like we could know that it's just like watching a movie where you know it's actors, but you're emotionally invested in the story of it. When it's done right, when it's done wrong, it is like really bad.
Who are like the hot? I don't mean like physically hot, but like popular.
We can go any way you want.
Right? No, but like the popular villains of wrestling right now. Because at the time that I stopped watching wrestling, like this was back in the day. So like I probably quit like around the Stone Cold Steve Austin period, right? So it's been a hot while.
That was the name I've been trying to think of.
Yeah. You know, but like totally after like Stone Cold and The Rock and stuff, like I gradually sort of moved away. So I don't know any of the big names anymore. You know, I don't know any of the hot names, but amazing. I love this idea that the fans are part of the narrative, right? Because wrestling can be so satisfying if you just want to go and have that visceral good versus evil experience, and like the good guy comes out on top. But almost more thrilling is when like a really compelling villain just wipes the floor with the quote unquote good guy. So we're like the hot villains right now.
See, the thing is, nobody is as hot now as those guys you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Like The Rock and Stone Cold, like that era specifically. The business at that point was predicated on guys who had spent a lot of times in different territories in the old territory system. Now, WWE dominates everything. So people like enter the business trying to get into WWE. And there's independent territories around, but they're not. Like it used to be that there was this national organization called the National Wrestling Alliance. And in every individual region was programmed by local television. So you could get started in the Memphis territory and get your name there, kind of build your thing up, and then you would move on to the AWA in Minneapolis. You could be a whole new character at that point. Nobody had ever seen you, but you would get all this experience traveling around the country, developing, seeing what worked and what didn't. So by the time you got to the WWF or WCW, the two big national companies, you were like a fully formed entity. And you knew how to manipulate large buildings of people. And that doesn't really exist anymore. Like the guys and the gals are so packaged now and kind of developed, and we watch their development. Like there's nowhere to go and hide and learn how to be a wrestler now. It happens like right in front of our eyes. So we get more invested in the story of the human now than we get in like, what they're doing on an emotional manipulative level. But Kevin Owens is a guy. He's probably one of the most effective villains, except they don't use him very effectively. Is the problem? It's kind of all about the good guys right now, because that's where they kind of know how to market good guys better. How
global is the reach for WWE?
Worldwide. Yeah. They have a UK contingent now. They're starting to do more work in Japan. They just did this really huge thing in like Saudi Arabia a couple months ago. They have a big, huge event coming up in Australia. It's worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
I'm so
I
interested.
kind of want to watch wrestling now.
I know. I'm so interested.
You got to watch it with me.
I was going to say, like, when I'm back in LA next time, let's have a little wrestling
Also,
day.
like, you need to shout out, like, we try and, put relevant links and stuff in the show description. So if there are, like, wrestling blogs you read, or if there's, like, different stuff you would direct people to, definitely let us include that, because now I want to find out more.
I know. I'm because wrestling is this weird, here's what, okay. When people who don't play video games anymore are like, talk about video games, they talk about Pac-Man and Mario to me. Like, they don't understand anything since then. And that's how I feel about wrestling. Is I remember like Hulk Hogan. I literally was sitting here for 20 minutes trying to remember his name. I was like the dude in yellow.
I'm going to send you guys a video.
Yeah.
This guy named Super Eye Patch Wolf on YouTube. He does.
From the name alone.
It's a great name. And he does like these super great detailed like video essays are just about stuff he's passionate about. He has this one about like why professional wrestling is fascinating. It's like 30 minutes. It's perfect.
Okay.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'm into it.
All right, let's move into what's your freak out? Ebony, you want to start us off?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I do this all the time, and I apologize. I will give y'all like a preliminary freak out before I've even had a chance to consume something, but I already know I'm going to love it. So I was listening to NPR. I think it was Sam Sanders' show, It's Been a Minute, the other day in the car, and he had two actors from this star show called Vida, and they were talking about... So the show is set in East LA and filmed in East LA. And it's about this Mexican family that comes back together after the death of the mother. And these two sisters who are very different come back and try and wrestle with, like the family and relationship dynamics and, the kind of gentrification that's happening in East LA, both external to the Mexican American community, but also internal to the Mexican American community. And the thing that interested me so much, and the reason why I'm going to watch, I think there's like 6 episodes in the first season, which you can watch on the Stars app. I sound like I'm giving a plug. Anyway, they use lots of Spanish in the show, but they don't subtitle it.
Whoa.
Yes.
Right? And so
I love that.
Right?
I mean, I do and I don't, because I don't understand it, but I love that it's like, this ain't for me.
Right. And so
this part isn't for me.
Yeah, so they're talking about this in this interview I was listening to, and I don't know which actor was saying it, but she said, this is a brown gaze show. We deliberately did not subtitle it, right? I know, right? I was like, so I'm determined to watch it. And, as they went through, they were like, there's sometimes context clues that'll clue you in. But if you are not someone who speaks any level of Spanish, there's going to be stuff that you miss. It is important that you have that experience, just as it is important for people who do speak Spanish, who are part of these communities, to know that this is a show that is for them. So just the fact that she used the term brown gaze, I was like, right? I'm in it to win it. So Vida is the name of the show.
It's amazing that
VIDA. It's on Stars.
Sorry.
Nope, that's it.
I'm just like, it's amazing that gets picked up. Like that you can sell that show.
Right. Well, and apparently it's very popular
time.
too.
That's awesome.
Like this is what happens when you serve the community. They come out and they're like, yes, we want more.
I think increasingly, if you even look at like the programming on a network like FX, for instance, like all of their programming is like super risk taking, and they get rewarded with all these Emmys and shit. I feel like that's the wave now. Like the old wave was broad appeal. The new wave is like
niche focused,
specific. Like as more specific you can make it, like the stronger it's going to be.
Right. Yeah. I think the era of trying to get like a new Cosby Show or Roseanne or like these kind of tentpole shows around which an entire network can build an empire are largely gone. And so they're like, okay, should we keep, throwing, 10, 20, 50, $100 million for a show that may hit, may not, or do we give, less money to these, talented creators who like maybe have web series or, whatever, and they have an audience, they've built up an audience, and we know that we're going to get greater return on our investment. I think it's a lot
to do with platform though, because on the one hand, a lot of the cable networks are moving in that direction, but if you look at broadcast television, like Fox just got rid of all of its like nice looking, single cam comedies like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Last Man on Earth, all of those.
Right.
And now it's going more towards that CBS market of like the old school sitcom with the laugh track. Like they're trying to go broad because when you're playing on the broadcast level, that advertising money, you really got to play ball like that.
Yo, when Anita and I did a Star Trek Discovery podcast, and it's on CBS All Access, and the ads during that show were just a mind trip, So, CBS.
They were terrible. Sorry, my mouth's full of water. They were awful.
They're awful, and they're awful in a specific way because CBS knows its audience, right? So it's heavy on police procedurals. It's heavy on like military hagiography,
and
right?
fucking young Sheldon.
Yeah, exactly. But it's insurance ads or like ads for prune juice or whatever. It's an older audience. No, like I'm being legit. Like it's an older audience, who is very much into Law and Order, right? So we were talking about what does it mean when a show like Star Trek or a franchise like Star Trek finds a home on that network? Of course, it's going to affect the version of Star Trek that we get.
Absolutely.
So is it any surprise we get a more militaristic version of Star Trek on CBS? But yeah, like the ads, you're absolutely right. On broadcast TV, pay attention to who you see advertising on your favorite show, because that's absolutely, going to affect the direction your favorite show is going to go in. It has to. That's how they pay their bills.
See, and just to real quickly take it back to wrestling, they've been on basic cable forever now in USA. They just did a deal where they sold one of their shows to Fox. It's supposed to be on broadcast, and we're all like bracing ourselves for what that's going to mean for the writing on that show.
Right.
Because it does have to appeal to that demographic.
Yeah.
Are the people
Although I'd say Fox has some, like, they definitely have programming that's not shitty. Like, they definitely have some good shows that I would be down with. So, like, Fox's television programming is different than Fox's news programming to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The people who write for wrestling, just the final thing, are these people who like have come from like TV writing and stuff? Yeah, interesting.
And, increasingly so.
Yeah.
And that used to be a big no-no in the industry. But now, as WWE, like it went public and became a full-on corporation, they've gone in that direction. They have like a writer's room.
So interesting.
Is your freak-out done?
Yeah, sorry. I took a lot of time. Nope, it was just about Vida. So people watch it.
Yeah, cool. Mike, you got a freak out for us?
I'm gonna freak out about Waypoint Radio. I feel like Anita, I think we talked about that on the boat.
Did we?
Waypoint Radio is
I don't remember.
It's Vice's video game arm is Waypoint. And Vice is quite a problematic company, but Waypoint, its video game subsidiary, has a completely different identity. It's head by Austin Walker. I think that's why we talked about it, because we were talking about Austin Walker. Who's a wonderful person, and he's a guy I was excited to meet at E3 finally. We've been talking for a while.
You met him? I still haven't met Austin.
Oh, believe me, it was a challenge. It was a challenge. It was like 2 days worth of coordination for like 20 minutes.
Yeah. Right. Sounds about right.
But he's great, and the greatest thing about them to me, they have a wonderful website with a lot of journalists who do a lot of great writing, but I love their podcast. They drop it twice a week. It's called Waypoint Radio. It's Austin Walker, Patrick Klepek, Danielle Riendeau, Robert Zachney, Danica Herod, and they always, they're analyzing games for quality, but they're also analyzing it based on, like actual human values.
And it's not all a bunch of white dudes like
it's
every
not,
other gaming podcast. Like not everyone, but
yeah, but they definitely they self-analyze and they analyze the product with those perspectives. And they analyze the industry and they talk about crunch. They talk about all of the factors outside of a game that influence, how people should or shouldn't, or how they feel like they should or shouldn't engage with it. And they put all of that into their reviews of products. And I love being able to have that sort of perspective as I've gotten back into gaming.
Yeah, nice. I guess my freak out, since I didn't talk about Handmaid's Tale, I guess I'll just bring that up. I don't have a lot to say about it. Did you watch it, Mike?
I have not.
All right.
But you did, in fact, freak out.
I did.
Like, every time you watched an episode.
A real freak out.
Yeah.
So I didn't watch it when it came out last year. And I don't know why. So here's the thing is everyone's like, it's really dark. It's really dark. I was like, yeah, but I don't have a problem with really dark. Like, I watched Top of the Lake. I watched Broadchurch. Like,
I could make it through Top of the Lake.
Yeah. Like, no problem. Totally got through. I mean, it's dark, but I got through it. It's fine, right?
Boring to me.
Oh, was it? Man, buddy. But I don't usually shy away from that. But for some reason, I was like, I don't want to do this right now. Like, it was just like everything in the world was on fire and I didn't need more fire. Right. Like I that's why when The Good Place came out, we were all like, happy times. Right? Like, it was so pleasant. So I finally watched it. And I did kind of, I did binge it a bit. Like, I watched the first season in a couple of days, and it's a brutal show to binge. And it's a brutal show. Like, I understand, like, it came out in 2017. So while we were starting to learn that everything is on fire in a way that, like, we weren't used to seeing on a daily basis, this show about, like, just the sheer destruction of society, the takeover of conservative religious folks, that, like, the inhumane, like, deeply inhumane, like, slavery of women's bodies, of people into like, just really horrific in situations. Like, they do such a good job of showing how they got to it in these small segues of, like, what it was like before, what it's like now, how that happened. And you're like, oh my God, I could totally see that happening.
What's the time span? Like, how far in the future is it?
I don't know, actually. But it's like everything is fine. And then all of a sudden it's like a little bit here, a little bit there. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, women are kind of afraid to be out on the streets alone. Like, let me walk you home kind of thing. And then it's like, holy shit, we got to run away because they're literally they're like rounding people up. And unless you're a part of the like religious class and the, like, religious ruling class that had a coup, then you are either a handmaiden and you're, like, producing babies, or you are like a cook in the kitchen, or you're working a brothel.
Wow.
Like, oh God, what's her name? The star of the show.
Elizabeth Moss.
Yes. I mean, she's wonderful in everything she does. And it's gut wrenching and it's brutal. And, like, the last episode of the first season, I was screaming in my house alone. Like, I was freaking out because I just was like, what is happening? I've been told that the second season is even worse. Yeah. So it's sort of weirdly addictive because you're kind of, like, into it, but it's real intense. So anyways, I think it's a very well made show. I think it's really interesting, but I get why I didn't watch it. Like,
there's a specific
harsh
kind of heavy that's hard right now.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, this isn't, like, I think everyone can most people can appreciate how horrifying it is, but, like, literally being a woman of childbearing age and being like, it's really hard not to imagine yourself in these situations, and because they frame it so well. So, like, these women are getting raped just over and over and over again. And the show has to find creative ways of, like, showing that without showing it. And it's fucking horrifying to sit there and watch it. Yeah, it kind of makes you want to, like, get out in the streets and fight for some shit, to be honest, to be like, how do we stop this from happening?
Yeah.
So anyways, I haven't had anyone to talk to about this show.
Yeah, it's. I know that I'm never going to watch it. It's like
I would never recommend it.
Like, there are just certain things that, you know, like, if that kind of stuff. I've read the book. I saw the original movie that was based on the book. That's enough. It's too, like, I already feel like, have we gone too far to turn back? I don't know. I straight up feel like it might be time for me to be, what do they call them? A preparer? Not a preparer.
A prepper?
Prepper, yes. You know, and just, you know, find a compound, maybe in Yermo.
I have an earthquake backpack.
I'm obsessed with that town Yermo between LA and Las Vegas.
She's not even joking a little bit.
No, if y'all know anything about that town Yermo, hook me up. Hit me up on Twitter.
Fascinated by this place.
Town, and I think like the town exists because of the Marine base that might be there, which you can't really see, obviously, because it's off the main road. But it's dilapidated and new at the same time. It feels false in some way. Like something shady is going on in Yermo. But also the name is very funny to me. Yermo. Tell me about it. Yeah. If you know anything.
Please.
Don't get in trouble with the authorities by giving me the information if it's that deep.
Like a new Fox 1 hour show, Yermo.
I'm telling her, she needs a Netflix special of just like walking around this town and being like, so... what's the deal here?
Yeah. And I was like, this straight up would be that show where you would get off the highway and get into Yermo, but then every time you tried to drive out, like you could never find the exit or something. Ooh. Like, yeah, there's something going on.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's something going on in Yermo. Anyway.
All right. That's our show. You can catch us back here every single Wednesday. Remember that you too can join our podcast community and help us bring this extraordinary podcast every single week at d.rip/femfreak. If you are enjoying the show, please leave us a review on iTunes because you know what? It really actually helps. You give us a little star rating, maybe the higher stars would be good. And, you know, tell your friends when you're sitting around watching wrestling. You're like, hey, I just learned about this cool new podcast called Feminist Frequency Radio. And on Feminist Frequency Radio, I learned about this other cool podcast called...
my podcast, the wrestling one?
Yeah.
It's called Tights and Fights.
There you
Shut
go.
up. Oh, my God.
That's great.
Every Thursday.
You can check out all of our work and our other podcasts at feministfrequency.com. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at FemFreak to stay up to date on all of the news. You can find me at Anita Sarkeesian. You can find Ebony at somewhere this week.
I'm going to come up with a wrestling name, and I think I want to be the Bear Cub. So look for me at the Bear Cub.
Fuck yeah. I'm here for that. Carolyn, who was not on this week, is at Carolyn Michelle. And Open Mike Eagle, tell us everywhere we can find your stuff.
You can just go to Twitter at Mike_Eagle, and you can follow things there to get anywhere else. But that's where I live. I live on the Twitter box.
Sweet,
right on.
sweet. And plug your podcast again because I interrupted you.
Oh, no. It's Tights and Fights, and that's on the Maximum Fun Network.
Excellent. Our producer is Phil Circus, who also composed our theme music, and we'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.